Hi, Julie.
Hi, Christina.
It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you
to
come into the Metavision Institute. It's fantastic.
It's fabulous to be here.
And I never would have dreamed when I started studying process work so many years ago, we'd be sitting here like this. But then
at your school.
Yes.
Surrounded by 40 students.
Yes.
It's great.
Would never have dreamed it. But then I think of how long you've been involved with process work, and I think, wow, that's a long time. And I'm just thinking, you've seen a lot, and also I think there's something that's held you all these years through the major part of your life. What would you say it is?
I think two things have held me. And the first thing that came to mind was relationship. I think relationship. I think that I'm extremely fortunate to have been introduced at such a young age to process work. I was 20, 21, and it wasn't just process work, it was a community of people. And I feel that I feel that I got involved in a community of, you know, extremely engaged, passionate, creative people who you know, just were devoted to learning and studying and were, you know, excited by Arnie and the work he was doing and loved Arnie and the work he was doing and so it was a group that I was lucky enough to become a part of, and I think that's true in many ways. I think that people, you know, the ideas certainly are what held me, but I think that I can't imagine without the people that I would have stayed in so long. I feel those two things go together. So the second thing is the ideas. I feel that one of the most amazing things about process work is the juxtaposition of how simple on one hand and how complex the framework is. So it's infinitely innovative. It's this extremely simple framework of understanding phenomena. Very, very simple. But it yields just infinitely complex applications and results and processes, and every time you use it, you're surprised what comes out of it, and that's just phenomenal. That's just, you're never bored. Someone like me, that's really important for. So I would say that it's the beauty of the paradigm or the method and the incredible power and simplicity of it, and then of course the people in the community.
So I imagine there was an excitement of the pioneering aspect of it too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That would have been engaging and rippling through all of it.
Absolutely. Yes. Just to come in on the ground floor of anything. It's phenomenal. Just the creativity and the feeling that you're a part of a discovery, and I think Arnie was just so incredibly generous in that way with, you know, collaborating with people, beginners and practitioners, and you know, he so values beginner's mind, and I think that was so reflected in how he encouraged us, really young students, to participate and to explore together, and it was just wide open for us to participate, and that was so very unusual. So I feel very lucky about that.
Also, there's been a number of developments and phases and changes through this time that I know something of. I'm just would be so interested to hear something of your reflection on all that.
All the changes
through the years.
Well, there's changes in the structure of the process work community and its different learning centers. There's changes in the theory. So there's changes at many levels. I can talk both. When I think of changes, I think of two parallel changes. I think of changes in evolution of the theory, and I also think of changes in evolution of the of process work as a body, as a not as a theory, but more as a method and its changes. So just briefly, when I first got involved, it was really a formative phase. It was a phase of theoretical development and sort of really putting together the pieces, channels and signals and structures, and, you know,
primary and
secondary, and just getting that was very early on. And then of course, part of that grew was all those different, the body work, and then coma work got involved, and then extreme states, and then finally group work. And that was sort of the growth of the theory and growth of the model. And then I think the next phase was a large phase of development, of training it. So then the training of that model became a really big focus for many, many years. How do you teach it? How do you train it? That was when a lot of the training programs got created and developed, and people were starting to think about what does it take to learn it and how do you learn it. And then of course that feeds back into the theory, because to have to teach something, it sort of makes you see more about your own theory and model. And then I think the phase we're in now has to do with applying process work. So there's a theoretical and model development, and there was training, and now there's application where people are really taking it into really different places, whether it's art and creativity, whether it's organizations and conflict and politics and coma work, palliative care, and now it's really reaching out and going into a lot of different areas, and sometimes not known as process work. Sometimes it's just the tools and the methods and people applying it without it necessarily being presented as such. And I think that's feeding back also into the model, and I'm curious to see where that will develop.
So it's come out of a psychological and psychotherapeutic route, but it's diversified a lot.
It's diversified a lot.
Yeah,
That's
and then we have a book by Amy, for example, an alternative to therapy.
That's right.
And then it goes on, and earth-based work. And
exactly,
so
and now people call it an awareness. Arnie and Amy call it an awareness paradigm. It's not anymore a therapy, because it's not really, it's not about healing. It's not about healing or helping people, or even only, but it's about bringing awareness to problems, or bringing awareness to things, and what happens when you add awareness and focus and intention to something. And and I think that to come back to the question of its development, I think that it's gone from a much more therapeutic focus and a more kind of information signal-based thing to something that focuses now more on sentience and essence and awareness, and has a more subtle approach.
Yes, and I was just at Arnie and Amy's seminar last year in London, where Arnie was working with the stochastic element of unpredictability. Oh, it's just amazing.
It's so rich how he continues to innovate and explore and go out and out, earth-based, now universe, and seeing things from... Right. So it makes it exciting, and
so that's what keeps you in.
And that is what keeps me in. That's right. That's
so I'm just thinking of the students here, for example. They often feel intimidated at the end of a 2-year program,
right?
And they feel, are they equipped to work, and how can they work with this? Do you have any advice or comments?
Yes, I would say, of course you feel that way. You should feel that way, because I felt that way after a 10-year training, so I can imagine a 2-year training. But I think it's because really what a training gives you is it gives you a ground and a framework to learn. It doesn't equip you with all the skills. You don't have the skills. It's the skills of working with people and the skills of really helping groups, organizations, clients are skills that you really grow over years of practice. You can't really get it without doing it. And so a training program gives you a structure, and it gives you a framework. It teaches you enough to analyze what's happening, and it teaches you enough to work with what happens to you, and it teaches you enough to develop a sort of a bit of a distance from the person and your own experience, and to see how those two things work together. And then you're just ready to start working, and you have to jump in unprepared. There's certain things in life that you don't practice it and then you can do it, and this particular profession is like that. You can't, it's like being a mother. You can't practice being a mother by having babies, right? So you have to just do it, and you're never going to feel ready, and it just comes.
And I guess that's the essence too of keeping a beginner's mind.
That's right. That's
and
right.
a not knowing mind that we don't know.
You don't know.
And that's quite scary.
Exactly. And it's a good thing because it's a beginner's mind, and it makes people feel comfortable too. Not everybody feels free in the presence of an all-knowing expert. You know, it's sometimes nice to co-explore together.
Yes.
That's good for people too.
It's one of the things I love watching in the processes when you work with somebody.
It's an exploration. I never know where it's going to go, and I still don't know where I'm always surprised. And, you know, it's so funny because the book that Caroline and I wrote, A Path Made by Walking, you know, it's the perfect title, but I think I rediscover that meaning again and again and again. Oh, I didn't know where this was going. All I knew was to follow the next step. And then afterwards I look back and I think, oh, I really didn't anticipate it would go here. So.
And I imagine that's the simplicity of the method.
That's right.
Of the approach that you were referring to before, this simple thing of following the steps and following the processes and following the signals and trusting that the process will unfold.
Exactly. Trusting, I want to say, trusting in the process, there's a certain leap of faith. This is really hard to communicate. There really is a leap of faith. Sometimes there's like a risk that if you follow something unknown, it won't happen. And you can't mitigate that risk. Sometimes it really doesn't happen. Sometimes you don't know where you are and you can't make sense of it, and you just have to wait and see what happens. So I trust, but I also, what am I saying? I trust and I acknowledge that really we may not get there. I'm taking a leap of faith. And so.
So, you've written the book with Caroline, The Path Made by Walking.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on another book on power. I'm working on a book, User's Guide to Power, which is the name of my blog, and I've been working on it for several years. And power, I wrote my doctorate I worked on in the mid-'80s was on power. I started thinking, I was fascinated by power and discourse, so I did my doctorate on an analysis of power and status and discourse, and I looked at interaction and conversation in small groups, and this was like 86 and 87 and 88 that I did that, and it's amazing. I went back, I looked at that, my doctorate, which got published as this little textbook, and my definition of rank back then is still a definition that I use now on how I talked about local and global rank, and I'm amazed that I was fascinated by those things then. And it's just incredible how you think about, you don't really know what you're thinking about. Like you research something and it just evolves over time, and you continue to research the same thing as if you've never researched it before. And then you come back and you go, oh, now I know what I'm doing. Sometimes I think about Arnie and the dream body and then the process mind, 30 years in between that. And in a way, it's like a further iteration of the same thing, but this is what he meant. Even though dream body is so phenomenal and revolutionary. So to come back to what I'm working on Power, a book on how to use power well. I call it, in the United States, we have something called driver's ed, which is when driver's education, when a learning driver, when you take a class to learn how to drive a car.
Oh, yes.
It's called driver's ed.
Okay.
It's short for education. And I'm calling this book a power ed, because I feel that power is, people are afraid of power. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, but not inevitably. It can be taught, it can be learned. And we don't really learn how to use power. Nobody teaches us how to be an authority, how to use power when we're not an authority, how to use personal power. And it's simple. It's not simple, but there's simple mechanisms for how to use power well, and there's simple mechanisms for how we don't use it well, and what happens, what goes wrong when we don't use power well, and what drives us to misuse power. So I want to look at that. what
it's
are
fascinating.
Yeah,
really fascinating topic.
For me, it is. Yeah.
Oh, and it seems to me that power actually is in just about everything.
Everything. Power's in everything. And more has been written about power than just about any topic, but very few people write about power in terms of just how to use it. People write about how to get more power or how to minimize power, but to really just use it well, I think there's a lot that we can explore there. So,
wow. I'm looking forward to reading this book.
I'm looking forward to finishing it. So.
How far off do you think it is?
I'm hoping, I'm always optimistic. I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm hoping by the end of the year it'll be out. So we'll see.
That's great. Okay. And, you know, I'm just thinking as we sort of wrap up, I'm thinking again of the students. Is there anything you would say to a beginning student or a student looking and saying, well, yeah, I'm interested in process work, but I don't know what it's about, or anything like that? I mean, is there any, from your position and your experience of teaching people, bringing this work? Is there...
What I would say to somebody starting out is I would say, enjoy. I would say enjoy it. There's something so exquisite about being a learner. There's something so exquisite about being in a journey of discovery, and to choose a topic like process work, or to choose a topic like psychotherapy or counseling or facilitation or whatever, where you're choosing to explore sort of the last frontier, which is the human condition. And it really is, it's the unexplored frontier. I think that the humans are so infinitely mysterious, and humans together are even more infinitely mysterious and troublesome and amazing. And to choose that as a profession or even as a discipline to study, I think it says a lot about someone who would choose that. And I think you'll never know the answers. And how wonderful that you've chosen to study something that you could never fully master. I want to applaud someone who does that, because that's a courageous, curious, creative person.
That's beautiful. I think that's a lovely comment, and I think that one of the things that I'm observing with the students here is, as you said right at the very beginning, the community makes so much difference.
Right.
There's a community that's developing, and the students always say it's their fellow travellers that help so much along the way.
Right. We have also made our system back in Portland into a cohort system, and the students love it, and because what you get then, you get two teachers. You get your teachers who are your peers and support, and then you get the teachers in the faculty. But there's nothing like having a cohort to support you. I had that in my informal cohort of students. The community that I studied with and grew up with, and I wouldn't be anywhere today without them. So.
Beautiful. Yeah. And thank you for coming to be in our little
That's a pleasure.
community.
Thank you for having me. It's a great community. Feels very good here.
Okay. Well, I hope you come back, Julie.
Thank you very much.